If you feel really, really passionate about doing more than one thing, do more than one thing because it works and it is possible, and that's totally okay.
When you do the thing that you love, the thing that brings you energy, that's where all the light comes in. That's where it all stems from, and that is your greatest capacity for making money.
It works really well for you to do what brings you joy because that gives you more energy to do other things.
Stop waiting for the appropriate, right, perfect moment and like dare to be inappropriate. Like dare to just show up and let it flow and let it fly.
It depends on your comfort level with being that human that publicly.
As human beings, we respond to the humanity in each other, and we can sense the inauthenticity.
So the more human you can be in your business, the better.
You're one person. You are a diamond that is multifaceted and it is all part of you. It is all connected. All these pieces of ourselves are intertwined.
There needs to be balance so that there can be joy. And in order to do that, you need to know that it's going to flow from a different perspective too. When we're younger, we transmute all of that through play. But as adults, writing and drawing and coloring and podcasting, that is our adult play.
We are here to expand. We're here to grow.
Get ready to love everything I am. All I want to be and understand. 'Cause I won't dim my light for no one.
They told me I had to pick one thing. No. Diamonds are multifaceted, and so are we. It's about time we let all the parts of us shine. How can we climb out of the box and fully embrace our own authenticity? I'm Cara Lee, and it's time for the Multi-Passionate Mama podcast, where clarity and creativity go hand in hand. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Multi-Passionate Mama podcast. I'm excited to share this episode with you. I know that I'm kind of always excited, but today we get to talk about how to be your most authentic, like real human self on social media with a bona fide social media expert. She's amazing. Today, our special guest is Brittany Miller. She is a mom, a mystery buff, bookworm, a home decor DIY enthusiast, and the owner of Brittany Miller Socials and host of the Go Get Great podcast. She's an online marketing strategist who helps business owners like you ignite your online presence to drive consistent growth and sales with easy to create social media, email marketing, and podcasting content. She's amazing, and she offers DIY products, courses, and done-for-you services designed to help ambitious entrepreneurs market their business with confidence and ease. She is so much fun. I absolutely love this conversation, and I learned so much, and I think that you will too. Welcome, Brittany. Well, hi, Brittany. I'm so excited to have you today on the Multi-Passionate Mama podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talking about this. I feel like the term multi-passionate is sometimes seen as a bad thing, and I would love to kind of redefine that.
Absolutely. I definitely want to change the perception around that, because I think that we've been taught for a long time that like pick one direction. Well, and actually the truth is, like, as little kids we're taught, be well-rounded, learn a little bit of everything. And then as you start getting into adulthood, they're like, no, niche down, pick something. And we're like, but wait, I like all of it. So I want to start with, like, when you were a kid, what was the thing that lit you up? What did you really love? And what kind of direction did you see your life going in when you were little?
Okay, so I feel like those are two different things for me. When I was younger, what lit me up was always dancing, actually. I was a competitive dancer when I was younger. Not to say that I was any good at it, but that was like my after school activity. I was always in the dance studio. I did mostly cheerleading, but a little bit of hip hop and musical theater. So it's nice to see that someone else, stage makeup and all those wonderful things. We've got some stuff in common.
Well, and I want to point out that, like, the you said, well, not that I was any good at it, and it's like, like the thing that we love, like we get to grow into being
Mhm.
good, quote unquote, like good.
Mhm.
Like all the people who are professionals at the thing that they do now, like they were not, good at it most of the time when they
Mhm.
were kids. They just did it a lot until they were
Mhm.
good at it. Like when I started podcasting, I was not good at it, right? Like when you start anything, you always start as new. You always start as a beginner. You don't
Mhm.
start as a professional, right? You start as
Mhm.
somebody who's a beginner. So we have to become and grow into somebody who's a professional.
That's true. And I feel like a lot of that for me was kind of the perceptions that my teacher has had about the skill level that I should be at for
Yeah.
those things. And like I was always a heavier set child when I was younger. I've got, I don't know, my mom likes to call it a big bone structure, but like there was added weight on top of that. So like I didn't look like other typical dancers and I couldn't do some of the same things that they could do. Like I loved cheerleading, but doing flips was not in my forte. So I feel like I didn't necessarily get to grow and develop into that kind of person because they had this perception
Yes.
of Brittany can't do this, so we're not going to spend our time working with Brittany to develop those skills. So I
It's
did it because I
such a
loved
thing.
it, but
It's such a thing that the family dynamic of like the perceptions that are heaped upon us of like what you will and will not be able to do in your lifetime. Like I come from a large family and I always wanted to be a singer. And it was like, I'm sorry, but big girls aren't visually accepted
mm,
on stages. And so that's why I started studying opera because I was like, that's the only stage that I will ever be accepted on, is because that's where
mm,
fat girls can be, visually accepted.
yeah.
And it was just this constant narrative of like, you can't be like a rock star or a pop star without, that sex appeal on
Hmm.
stage. And the same is kind of true for dancers of like, you have to have that physical type or sorry. And
Hmm.
thankfully, that narrative is kind of changing in our world today. But like 20, 30 years ago, that was not the case.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's so true. And part of me wonders too if, I had maybe had, like, my parents were supportive, but like more support from my dance school and my dance teachers, whether or not my life would have gone in a different direction, whether or not I would have continued dancing. Because I kind of stopped out of high school at that age. That was kind of like the acceptable time to, okay, now you go off to school and you start adulting. And like this was just like a fun childhood hobby sort of thing. And like that's not what you should be doing now.
Now
And
take it
even as
seriously and have a real career. And
yeah. Yeah. And even doing it as an adult as a hobby is hard because there are not a lot of like dance classes and opportunities for adults to do that, even if they just want to do it for fun. So it's really unfortunate that I'm not able to kind of pursue that as much as I would like, even now as an adult, where I'm like, it doesn't matter what other people tell me. If I like it, I'm going to do it because the options just simply aren't there for that.
oh, you're so, so correct. I totally see that. And there's community theater options for like acting and singing and
Hmm.
things like that, like a little bit, but they're a huge like time commitment. But as far as dancing goes, you're totally right. There's not a ton of options. But one
Hmm.
thing I wanted to also point out was like our parents can be really supportive, but they can only be supportive to like the limit that they support themselves. So like
Mm.
whatever beliefs that they have about their own bodies and their own abilities to excel in their own dreams, like their limits will show up in their ability to support their kids. And that's why it's so important for us as parents to work through our own beliefs about our own abilities so that we can support our kids in what they can do in their lives.
Hmm. Hmm. That's so true. And like as a mom, I've got an almost 5 year old. So 4, 3, a year and a half, and 3 months. I've got four. And all my kids are like very vastly different and trying to figure out how you can support them all equally, but in different capacities is like, oh my goodness, that takes up all my mental capacity right there.
Oh, they are so different. It's incredible. You're like, how can this wide variety of personalities come from I feel like my husband and I have so many similarities. And then I'm like, these people, these humans that came from us are like, I don't know where they came from. They are so, so different. And then figuring
Mm-hmm.
out how to support them in their own different learning styles. I feel like motherhood and parenting is just the greatest way to learn who you are. And like second to that is
Mhm.
entrepreneurship.
Yes. Yeah. And you kind of brought up something as we were talking too. It's like our kids feel very different to us, but then I go and talk to my mom and my mom's like, "Oh, you were just like this as a kid." And I was like, "Well, then where along the lines did I stop being like this? Because that is not what I am like now."
Yes. I had that same kind of discussion with my parents where they were like, "No, you've always been you." And I can see that in my kids where I'm like, nope, you're the same. Like it's just from the womb. You've always been you. And
Mhm.
my parents have said things like that to me. And I'm like, but I don't feel like the same human
Mhm.
that I was when I was 4. I feel
Mhm.
so much more limited. I feel so much more restricted. And so like
Mhm.
where along the lines, like you were saying, did I feel the internal shift, even if it's not showing externally, that
Mhm.
I felt less confident and less like I could be my true self.
Yes. My 4-year-old version did not feel nearly as judged or as like aware of outside perceptions and input and all of those things than I do now. And like even as an adult, we can know that we shouldn't listen to what other people say and do what feels right for us. But it's still hard to put into practice because of the societal conditionings that we've had our entire lives from like the age of 4 onwards.
Yeah, we are so, so heavily influenced by the thing that what we perceive others around us are
Hmm.
thinking and feeling about what we are doing. And so where along, the lines in your journey did you see that starting to come on and how did that influence your path?
I'm sure it happened probably around that age, like 4 or 5. My memory doesn't really go back that far. I feel it a lot more in high school. We were talking about my desire to dance and not necessarily being supported by that. And also, like, my career path choices. Like, I grew up watching CSI with my dad. I was probably way too young to be watching CSI, but like, that was our thing. And I loved it. I loved mysteries. I loved, like, the forensics, but I went to school and science was not my forte. It was not something that I got good grades in. So when you do in Canada anyway, we go in grade 11, we talk to our guidance counselor and they try and help you plan your life, this whole grand scheme of like what you should be doing for your career and education and then what your job is going to be afterwards. And I was like, you know what, I really enjoy this. I would love to go into criminology and study like behavior of criminals and all of that. And they just looked at my grades and went, you don't have the grades for this. So your options are to go back and retake all of your science classes to get the grades that you need, or you do something different. They're like, you have like solid okay marks in business or in English, like you should do one of those two things. And I was like, I can't spell to save my life. I'm not doing anything in the world of English. So I was like, I guess it's business. And like thankfully I love what I do now and it has set me up for success. But like that was very limiting and I could see really clearly that the trajectory of my life changed because I wanted to go and do this thing and they just flat out told me that that was not going to be an option for me and I should go and do this other thing. And it turns out I could have. Once I got into like my 4th year of university and I was like taking elective classes, when I actually looked up the prerequisites to go into criminology, you don't even need science classes for most of them. I was like, are you kidding me? I was so mad.
Well, and there's such a huge focus on like what will make you money over
Mm-hmm.
what lights you up. And it's
Mm-hmm.
such a pity because it turns out that what lights you up it should be the determining factor for your life because when you do the thing that you love, the thing that brings you energy,
Mm-hmm.
that's where all the light comes in. That's where it all stems from and that is your greatest capacity for making money
Mm-hmm.
because that's where you're magnetizing people to you. That's where
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just so much there, but when you are focused on where can I make money, it's a really limiting mindset.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I think that that's something that our generation is kind of bringing more awareness to, but I think it's not going to be something that we see in our lifetime happen as like a societal job shift. I think that's going to be a few generations down the line, but it's nice that we're starting to have these kinds of conversations because before that it was like faux pas. It was like you went to school, if you went, you got a job and you stayed in that job until you retired. And like I would be so bored. I would literally be bored out of my mind because I like new and I like different and I like change and I don't want to be told what to do by somebody else. I want to figure out how to do it all on my own, which is why I love entrepreneurship. But it's just so different kind of how we see these things, and I think what we're teaching our kids is going to be better for them too.
Absolutely. So where did you end up and what did that journey kind of look like?
Yeah. So, kind of back to one of the questions you asked at the beginning, what did I kind of envision my life looking like when I got older? Well, I thought that I was going to be a teacher. And I guess in the sense I am, but I'm not teaching kids. I'm teaching people that are wanting to start a business. Aspiring entrepreneurs is typically what I call them, because I do a lot of like coaching and masterminds and all of that. And I love that. And it does light me up. It's just different than, what younger me thought. But anyway, so high school, I did all of my business courses in high school, and then I went to school and I got my BBA. So I am certified as like a human resources professional, is what I focused on in school. Ironic now that I have a marketing business, I should have taken more marketing classes, but at the time that was what made sense. So I did that. Graduated from there, got a job for a couple years, didn't really like it, got pregnant unexpectedly, had kids, and then realized that going back into the workforce just didn't work. I didn't have daycare, it wasn't an option for me, so I needed to find something else to pay the bills that was following the money. And someone kind of told me that I would be really good at doing social media. They liked what I was posting, and there were other business owners that needed that. So I kind of dove into that in my business. And not to say that it was bad, it just wasn't something that really lit me up. So I've been kind of slowly over the last 3 years working to transition my business away from what people tell me I should be doing and more towards what I would like to be doing. And it's still in the realm of social media. I just don't want to be creating posts for other people. I'd rather empower other people to learn how to do it themselves. So I'm leaning more towards like focus, like strategy and coaching now.
I love that. It's more of teaching and empowerment than the hands-on creation um realm,
Yes.
which is the manufacturing realm, the which can be
Pretty much, yeah.
so I because I was in that for a while where it was like this is fun for like a minute and then you're like I'm kind of over this and it does get boring really fast for someone who's like I want to be creating something new and different every time, and teaching people how to do that is really I don't know, it feels inspiring, it feels uplifting. That whereas it's that expression of when you teach a man to fish versus teaching a man um giving a man a fish. Like you're inspiring generations because
Yes.
then that man gets to teach his children how to fish, and you're creating a generation that is able to do things for themselves instead of being reliant on you. And then it also stops limiting your capacity. And instead, you have the ability to have an exponential kind of growth in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing about coaching that's nice is, when I decide that I don't have the capacity for one-on-one anymore, I just take all of this information and put it into courses, and then you can kind of like sell it en masse, more or less, which is nice. So there's definitely an element of that too. And like, I am really driven by wanting to make an impact for other people. So I see the impact the most with one-on-one. I don't think I would ever stop doing that, but I know that to have a bigger impact, courses are kind of a great way to do that. So my multi-passionateness kind of really works really well with that, because I can be like, oh, I'm really lit up about this topic right now. Let me turn that into like a freebie or a mastermind. If a bunch of people are interested, then great. I'm going to keep going down that rabbit hole. How can I turn this into like a whole course to kind of teach the whole picture about that? So that's one of the things that I really like.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've found personally from one-on-one coaching is you tend to learn so much from really deep diving with individuals into what their specific needs are. But then you also tend to find patterns of like what groups of people are specifically struggling with. So along those lines, are there specific themes that you find that you would advise people on, just like a few things that you might be like, this is really helpful for entrepreneurs because we are talking to entrepreneurs who are moms who have a lot of things that they want to do, and like which one do I start with, and do you tend to find that as a common problem with your people that you work with?
Yeah, actually, I thought that I was one of the only ones that wanted, this big business. And I'm going to say big business only because we talked about this earlier, how everyone's like, pick one thing and do it. They're like, do social media, but not just do social media just for realtors. I was like, I like houses, but I don't want to stare at houses all day, every day. No, thank you. So I'll do social media for everyone. But then I was like, you know what? I want to do more than that. So I'm going to do social media and email marketing. And then it grew to social media, email marketing, and podcasting. And most people look at my business and go, this is absolutely insane. You can't do that. People need to know you for one thing, not three. And I was like, well, too bad. To have a successful business, you can't just have a good social media presence because if you're not putting people on an email list, then you're not really making any sales. And in order to do your social media easier, you need like a podcast or a YouTube page or something where you're creating this content to then talk about on social media. So you're not creating 30 totally random posts all the time. You're just picking pieces from this 30-minute like video or podcast that you created. So I was like,
Yeah,
to give my clients the best results in this area, I need to do these three things. So tough cookies.
they all feed into each other. The long form is kind of your basis for like getting to know people on that deep intimate level, but then the short form on social media is sort of the little like clickbait of like, come
Mm-hmm.
join me, come get to know me better. I invite you into my world. Please come.
Yeah.
I want to be your friend. I want to see you. Come
Mm-hmm.
on.
hmm So I think my advice to the people listening is, if you feel really, really passionate about doing more than one thing, do more than one thing because it works and it is possible and that's totally okay. And I think the other kind of piece of it too is as moms, we feel that and business owners, we feel like we have a lot on our plate already. So when someone's like, start an email list or start a podcast, before we even really figure out what that looks like, we're just like, no, no, like I'm at capacity. But sometimes adding more actually subtracts from some of the areas that you're already doing. So we talked about how it makes it easier. Most people don't see that big picture. So sometimes we just kind of need to take a step back and evaluate, be like, okay, I understand that I feel like I'm at capacity, but will doing this thing bring me joy, which is one of the big ones?
Because
And will
joy
it
brings you
help me do
energy.
something else? It does. It does. For most people, yeah. I don't know if you know anything about human design.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with human design.
Okay, okay. So I just did like a human design reading for myself last week. So like I'm all about this. So generators and mani gens. I'm a mani gen, which is probably one of the reasons why I'm multi-passionate. I can handle a lot of
Everyone
things.
looks at me and goes, "You must be a Manny Gen because you're so multi-passionate and you're always doing these things."
Mhm.
I'm actually a mental projector, but I'm
Oh.
surrounded by Manny Gens. My kids are two of my kids are Manny Gens and my husband's Gen.
Mm.
But I soak up all their energy and turn around and it
hmm
just yeah. So
But if you don't know your design type, just Google human design for free and like take the assessment, figure out what you are. But if you're a generator or a mini gen or a projector, then it works really well for you to do what brings you joy because that gives you more energy to do other things. So if you're like sitting at your computer, staring at the screen going, oh my God, I don't want to do this, that is not a good task for you. So if you do something else that would maybe help that task is somehow going to get easier. So by creating a podcast, if you don't like doing social media content, you're now making your social media content easier. So you're going to be more lit up. You're going to have more energy. It's going to be faster. So
yes,
more sometimes is less. Yeah,
it's
which
really
no
true.
one talks about.
Yeah, because I'm like I could sit in front of my screen and be like, what the heck do I post on social media? I have
hmm
ideas. I don't know what to do. I feel like I actually have very little social media like content and like presence because
hmm
I don't really do much, but I have a very regular thing that I do because of my podcast. Like I have my
hmm
very regular real schedule that I do
hmm
because of my podcast, and it's just like there you go, and it when you have the systems in place and you're like, I love doing this, like it's fun. And when it's
hmm
fun, it's not work because it's
Yep.
fun, because it's exciting and it brings you joy. And you're like, oh, wait a minute,
hmm
I don't have to work at this. It's so much fun.
hmm Well, even if you don't feel like you do a lot on social media, that's how I found you. So it's working.
I'm glad. I'm glad because as a projector, I'm like, I don't want to. I don't want to
hmm
like spend all my limited energy like trying to like get out there and like force my, energy on people. I just want to like be there when I'm there, and
hmm
I think that applies to so many things and so many people. And what I find for me is that whatever's lighting me up in the moment, if I just follow that bliss, if I just follow the thing that I'm like, that sounds like fun right now. whether that is doing something productive, like I just sort of felt like rebranding my podcast one day and like
Ooh.
in May, I was like I went to this summit and I was like, I think it's time. Nope, right now. I'm gonna do it right now. And I didn't like overthink it and I didn't like it didn't become a whole thing. Like, and I was like, I could wait for a couple weeks or a month. And nope, I did it today. Like it was just done. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, nope, this just happened. Like before I even like had a chance to really think about it, it just was there.
Mhm.
Um, if I am not feeling it and I try to force it, it doesn't work. Like it
Mhm.
just doesn't happen. But when something's really aligned and really correct, it just sort of flows out of me effortlessly.
Mhm.
And when you're
Mhm.
following the thing that is the next right step, it just kind of happens.
Mhm. And I think that's a big thing too is, we have this creative idea, but then we get in our own heads and we start listening to all of those little voices inside our heads that are replicating opinions and thoughts and feelings that other people are having or sharing with us. And we absorb that energy and then we start second guessing ourselves and we wait and we pause and we don't do the thing. Whereas for me, that's bad because by putting it off, I've now like made this 10-minute task seem like it's going to take 7 hours. And then I was like, I sit down to do it finally 4 months later, and I was like, shit, I should have done this 4 months ago. And X, Y, and
Right.
Z probably would have happened by now if I had just spent
Right.
5 minutes instead of thinking about this and letting all of those like little voices tell me to know. So that's one of the things I'm really working on this year is like
Yeah.
when I have an idea, I'm like, okay, cool. And we're doing it now before all that happens. So
Getting the
stop,
have
stop
tos and the
thinking.
supposed to. Yeah, all the have tos, all the supposed tos, all of the structure. Like
Hmm.
structure has its time and place and it's good in so many ways, but you have to have that feminine flow and you have to like when it hits, you have to be like, "Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Let's run with this." And what tends to get in the way of those creative ideas and that flow of the inspiration is when we are not letting ourselves show up messy and we're like,
Hmm.
okay, I can only record a podcast when I'm sitting at my computer in front of a microphone and it has to be totally perfect and totally
Hmm.
silent and everything must be good. And I find that like I'll have all these great ideas for my podcast and I'll just write them down really quickly on my phone. And then
Hmm.
I will forget what the whole idea was because I only wrote down
Hmm.
like 3 words of it. But if I
Hmm.
just stop what I'm doing and I just, whatever situation and circumstance I'm in, if I'm driving and you can hear my car and I like, not dangerously, but just like hit record and just start talking,
Hmm.
like what actually flows out is like so much better than if I
Hmm.
waited until the better moment when everything was quiet and pretty and nice and perfect. Like if
Hmm.
I just can get the idea out when it's flowing, like stop waiting for things to be perfect and just let it be messy because that is
Hmm.
when the inspiration is flowing and it's that's when it really is like it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's so true. I was driving home from a retreat that I was at last year, and I was just like feeling so energized and inspired. And it was like a 3 hour drive. And I was like, I've had this great idea for the course that I wanted to do, the one that I launched this year, actually. And I was like, I really want to work on it, but like, I'm literally driving. I cannot, pull over and open my computer and type notes for 3 hours to like get this course idea out of my head. So I literally did that. I put my phone up on the dashboard. I turned on the voice note thing, and I just talked for 3 hours the whole way home. And then I came home and I downloaded it and I got a transcription from my little audio recording, and I literally just went through it afterwards and kind of restructured and moved some things around because I hopped around while I was talking. And I was like, this is 100% better than if I had waited until I was home with, a dedicated 4 hour block to sit down and do it because I wouldn't have remembered. So then when I finally could sit down, it was just like moving things around. So yeah, it is really that staying in the flow, do it messy. I mean, lots of people sing when they drive, so it probably wasn't weird, but I'm sure some people were looking at me going like, why, you stopped this stoplight and you're like doing all these gestures because I'm a very like
Ah,
handsy person
yes.
when I talk
Amen.
and people are like looking at me. I was like, you know what? I don't care because I am in the zone and this is great and this will be fine
Yes.
later.
And I think the message is like stop waiting for the appropriate, right, perfect
Hmm.
moment and like dare to be inappropriate. Like dare
Hmm.
to just show up and let it flow and let it fly.
Hmm. Hmm. It's like I feel like people do that sometimes and then they don't realize how impactful it is. I've done in-person presentations before or like master classes that I've been to. And sometimes the ones that I prepare for the least are actually my best because I talk about what is inspiring me and what has resonated and what kind of vibe and energy I'm getting out of the audience. And oftentimes those are better and more impactful for the people watching me than when I have this like super structured, like really educational type lesson that I'm teaching people because they take more away from the energy that you have rather than the words and what you're sharing.
It's so true. There's so much of like this fascinating balance between the over preparation and the just prepared enough. I'm like somehow now Toastmasters president. But as I know, I was like, well, how did this happen? I don't know. They made me Toastmasters president, and I was like, I guess I'll do it. And nobody else volunteered. So somehow I became Toastmasters president. But as like I've been on this journey of like showing up and speaking frequently as I've been, in Toastmasters, it's sometimes I'm really prepared and every single word is memorized. Okay, that happened exactly one time. That did not happen most of the time. That was one time for a competition. And most of the time, it's very off the cuff, and sometimes it's got different levels of preparation. But as you get to know yourself better and you see, like, okay, what level of prep do I need and how does it turn out? What happens when I show up with no plan? What happens when I'm just feeding off the energy? And then what happens when I have a vague idea of what I want to say and I have my message like in the back of my mind somewhere, but then I allow it to flow from there? And then what happens when I have every single word memorized? Am I overthinking it and I'm upset because I forgot what the next sentence was going to be and then I froze in the middle of it and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
my next line, I had written that out so perfectly and it was beautiful and then I forgot it, because that's what happens to me when I try to write out every single word. It's terrible and I get in my head. Like, you have to know yourself and how you react in these situations, but allowing yourself to have a flow and to react genuinely and then trusting yourself to respond to the situation well is so important.
It's so true. And I feel like it goes beyond just presentations. For anyone that's listening, you're like, well, I never speak in front of people. Like, no, it's more than that. A lot of times it's, how to respond to things my kids are doing too. But podcasting as well is a big one. If I sit down and I write out a full script of what I want to say and then I'm just like reading it word for word, my partner who does all my like podcast editing and management, he's like, babe, I hate editing those episodes. They're awful. Like your energy level is so low. You keep stopping because you forget what like you just said, you forget what your next sentence is. So then you're like looking at it and he's like, it just is not as good as when you literally just turn the camera on and talk. He's like, not to say that you don't ramble or like go on tangents that I have to cut out later, but he's like, the energy level and your passion and enthusiasm is so much better for me to listen to when you're not reading a script. And I was like, okay.
We are different. We are different when we are just like showing up as we are and like
hmm
authentically in a flow than when we're trying to like perfectly read a script. Like
hmm
our whole like aura and energy is totally different. And if you want to like dive into authenticity, like I love that topic.
Yeah, I think authenticity is really important. I think it's so much harder to be authentic now because of social media and how everyone has this like mentality that it has to be so perfectly curated and it has to look identical and like yes, okay, if you're a business and you're selling things on social media, there does need to be some semblance of similarity. Like I need to be able to look at two posts and tell they come from the same business. Like they need to have the same colors or fonts or the same human in the image. But like beyond that, we're just forcing ourselves into these stuffy boxes and it takes our joy and creativity out of it for starters, and it's just more time consuming for literally no reason. The post that I randomly do off the cuff, I snap a picture with my cell phone that like looks like crap with a randomly written caption because I'm feeling it in the moment. Those ones perform better than when I sit at my computer for 3 hours editing a reel and writing something that I feel should perform well. Like it's the same thing. It's energy transference.
Love that energy transference. And I feel like as human beings, we respond to the humanity in each other and we can sense the inauthenticity. We can sense the perfectionism in each other, like from a mile away. Like we can sniff it out, we can smell it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like you're not showing up as you, you're showing up as who you want us to see.
Mm-hmm.
And like we don't want that from each other. We want real. We want
Mm-hmm.
truth, even when it's scary and hard and it feels like nobody's gonna like that version of me because that
Mm-hmm.
version of me is messy and gross and smelly and sometimes forgets to shower and sometimes, like there's all sorts of things where we're like, nobody can know that my house is messy today and nobody
Mm-hmm.
can know that like my kids fight each other and nobody can know that
Mm-hmm.
like my
Mm-hmm.
life's not perfect. But the thing
Yep.
is, like, those are the things that unite us as
Mm-hmm.
human beings having a real life human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're like, oh yeah, hey, I'm a real human being here. With businesses though, it's such an interesting dynamic, and I want to hear your thoughts on this because it's how much humanity, there's a balance here. Like, how much
Mm-hmm.
humanity can you put in a business and have it still feel professional?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is a popular question, and I think a little bit of the answer is it depends on your comfort level with being that human that publicly. So before I started my business, I had a little tangent as like a blogger influencer. So I developed my comfort level being on camera before I actually started my business, which helped a lot. Before that, I was like, my house has to be perfectly clean, no one can see anything. But what I started realizing was that my own interactions with social media and who I liked following. Yes, okay, I used to follow some of those gorgeous accounts where their house was pristine at any point in time. And then I would go through random periods where I would just unfollow them because I just got so angry and frustrated that my house did not look like that. And how was I ever supposed to succeed as an influencer when my house didn't look like that?
You don't have
Meanwhile,
a
I'm
house cleaner coming every single day,
right, right. I mean, like,
or because you live there.
yeah.
I have to remind people in my home, like, we live here. Like,
Hmm.
there's life happening here, and when you live here, there's gonna be dirty dishes and clothes on the floor, and there's gonna be like life
Hmm.
happening. Life is like messy.
Hmm. And then when you actually start talking to people and interacting with them, nobody wants to see that perfectly curated. They want to know that they're not the only mom that doesn't have their shit together, that they send, Lunchables with their kids once a week because they just can't handle it anymore, that they leave dirty dishes piled in the sink because the episode of TV that you're dying to watch is more important than leaving dirty dishes there for 12 hours. Like, who cares? No one. So when you can show up and you can share that online, you're actually building a better connection with your audience because everyone does those things. And when you try and hide that, that's when it feels inauthentic because deep down we all know that most people are like not like that 100% of the time. So when that's the only perception you're putting out there, that feels inauthentic because we want it to be true. We all want the pristine house, the house cleaner, the no dishes, kids that are like adorable and listen to absolutely everything we ask them to do, but that is not the reality of the situation and we know that. So the more human you can be in your business, the better. And this is actually kind of well timed that we're talking about this because this is something that I have personally struggled with since I started my business. Like I said, I kind of came from that influencer background. I like talking about life. I made a lot of great mom connections. But then when you transfer that into the world of business, okay, well, great, I'm comfortable showing up on camera, but so much of my business is based on my life as a mom. Like my availability to work depends on how much my toddlers sleep during the day.
Right.
I found it very difficult and I tried to like keep the accounts separate and like this one was just business and this one was like more personal, but then it got to be too much to try and manage multiple accounts at the same time and then I would okay, focus on my business one, but then I felt like there was this big gap that I was missing on all the opportunity to like connect and create that realistic perception about what business is like. Yeah, okay, some days I work 8 hours and other days I spend 20 minutes scrolling for audio clips on Instagram that I can't find, give up and say I did nothing. So like there's a balance and I'm kind of at a point where I'm like, you know what? Screw the algorithm because that's one of the biggest reasons why I was keeping it separate. It was like Instagram's going to penalize me. It's not going to understand who I am. I'm not going to get my content shown to the right people. And if the wrong people see my content, then I have no clients kind of thing. But I was like, I can't do one without the other. That it's not who I am. Like my business is not this separate thing. I don't go to a 9 to 5. I cannot turn my mom brain off while I'm working, and I cannot turn my work brain off while I'm momming. So you get what you get with me, and you either like it or you don't, and it's just all going to start showing up on the same account now because that's just how it's got to be.
Well, and we try so hard to compartmentalize all these
Mhm.
parts of ourselves where we're like, okay, here's work version of me, here's mom version of me, here's
Mhm.
the version of me I was in college who liked the dancing and the singing, and here's all these different versions of me. And it's like, nope, you're one person.
Mhm.
You are a diamond that is multifaceted and is all
Yep.
part of you. Like I instead of like having all these different like categories and then like turning your attention to each one, like
Mhm.
I like to look at it as like a spoke, like spokes on a
Mhm.
wheel, and you're the
Mhm.
center, and but they're all together. Like you
Mhm.
can't separate like the dancing part of you from the mom part of you. Like
Mhm.
like I can't separate my music from my kids. Like they
Mhm.
influence my music whether I like it or not. Like it is all connected. All these pieces of
Mhm.
ourselves are intertwined. And
Mhm.
it is only harming ourselves to try to separate them.
Mhm.
And it's only harming like our audiences when we're like, no, I'm only professional all the time. I'm
Mhm.
just this
Yeah.
one
And
image.
it hurts our audience for sure, but I think it hurts us more because that compartmentalizing thing that you were talking about, it's impossible for us to be in all of those compartments and juggle all of the balls at the same time.
Right.
So when we let them go, then that's when we feel guilty. And that guilt eats at us. So then we try and pick that ball up, and then we feel overwhelmed and overstimulated. So then we drop a different one, and then we feel guilty again. So we try and pick it back up. And it can't be like that because you can't live in this constant cycle of either being guilt ridden or being overwhelmed. Like there needs to be balance so that there can be joy. And in order to do that, you need to know that it's going to flow and that, yes, okay, sometimes the balls are going to be on the floor, and other times it's okay for you to balance and talk about all of them. And when you kind of focus on that, I think that that's going to be a really big shift. So I would actually really love to see more of that on social media
Yes.
because what I see right now is all the compartmentalizing and, people managing
Right.
multiple accounts because they feel like that's what they need to. So I'm really hoping that in the next year or two, we see a shift back towards people doing a bunch of things all under the same name, the same brand,
Right.
whatever. A lot of people call that a personal brand with different
Hmm.
facets. And I think that that's going to be the best thing for all of us for our mental health going forward because we all are in the same spot. So why are we all fighting the same battles when we could all
Right.
just solve our own problems by just doing what we feel like we should be doing anyway?
Right. Like we are whole humans. We don't
Mhm.
have to just show off individual parts of ourselves when we are complete
Mhm.
people doing all of the things. And my thought with the like juggling the balls is like, let's get rid of the balls. Like let's get rid
Mhm.
of that whole analogy because there's no balls. It's all like maybe they're threads in a tapestry of our
Mm.
lives. Like they're
Mhm.
all interwoven. Like you can't get rid of it without untangling all of you. Like
Mhm.
don't do that.
Mhm.
Just maybe your focus shifts from one thread to another based
Mhm.
on where you're looking at any given moment, but there
Mhm.
you're not unweaving anything. You're not pulling out one thread to just isolate one.
Mhm.
You're just kind of shifting your focus based on, where you're looking at the moment. Like if you just are
Mhm.
working on business right now, that doesn't mean that your kids are not still part of you and
Mhm.
interwoven. Just
Mhm.
maybe your focus is slightly off to the left at this exact second.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy a lot better. Everyone should start using that. It's a tapestry.
For a tapestry. Well, and I really want to ask you
Mhm.
about how you can show up authentically on social media as a mompreneur
Mhm.
without um without compromising your kids' autonomy, without
Mhm.
being like, okay, and it's one thing when your kids are little. And it's like, okay, my toddler threw a huge tantrum, right,
Mhm.
on the grocery store floor, and it was awful, and that's a thing. And when your kids are really young, like that's pretty understandable. But it's
Mhm.
different when, like, my kids are now 10, 13, and 14, and it's another thing to be like, my 14-year-old But let's be honest here and talk about how teenagers also have things that
Mhm.
happen, but it's a totally different thing to talk about it
Mhm.
because your 14-year-old is going to be like, "Hold up, mom.
Mhm.
Do not want to be talked about on social media." And you're like,
Mhm.
"I want to really respect that, but I also
Mhm.
want to be real. I also want to I want to respect my children, but I
Mhm.
also want to be real." And there's this like dynamic in this balance here that's like, I'm not like, how do you
Mhm.
like that's
Mhm.
been a struggle for me personally, and I can
Yeah.
totally see that being like a thing for so many people where you're like, where's the line? Like, how do I
Mhm.
be relatable but not like but still respect my kids' boundaries? And
Mhm.
yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And before I kind of share some feedback on that, I want to note that it's not just kids, it's spouses and it's
Parents,
parents. It's
yes.
like, I'll have this experience with my mom. My mom and I butt heads sometimes. I think we're almost a little bit too alike in certain areas. And then I'll come home really frustrated and I'll like pop on the mic and I'll start talking about it. Or I'll turn on an Instagram story and be like, oh, this is, the conversation we had. Like, what do you guys think? And sometimes my mom sees my content and she gets so angry with me because she does not want to be talked about on social media. She does not like to be looked at in a negative light. And I was like, well, I mean, okay, maybe sometimes I do paint that picture a little bit, mom, and I'm sorry, but like that's my personal perception of the situation. And I wanted some other feedback. The biggest thing I think is having the conversation with the people that you're worried about overstepping and being like, where are you comfortable? How can we find a good compromise that works for both of us when I feel like I have something that I need to share, either a lesson or a question that I need to put out there? What are we comfortable sharing that works for both of us? So for my mom, I try and keep her off social media a little bit more than I was before because she's not so comfortable with it. Or I try and wait and I'll give myself like a 24-hour cooling down period so that I can then approach the conversation with my followers from a less my mom did this and I don't like it situation from okay, this is what I was feeling yesterday, but how can I look at it from a more calm perspective and see her side of it too, but then still get the feedback that I'm looking for from my audience. Or even sometimes with my spouse Grayson will be like, babe, I really don't want to be on camera right now, like can you turn that off, kind of thing. Like maybe we should have some like phone away time, because a lot of my content for my business is b-roll. So I'll shoot a lot of videos of me doing stuff with my kids at the beach or folding laundry or whatever. And there are times where he just doesn't want to be on camera too. So it's having those conversations, creating that mutual understanding, and then trying to kind of just implement that on basically a case by case basis to see where you're both at kind of at that point in time. And I think it's a little harder, like you mentioned, with kids. Maybe your 14-year-old you could have that conversation with, but your 10-year-old's probably not going to have that same sense of awareness
Yeah.
and kind of have to like wait it out until they're a little bit older. Or I've seen some people, on social media won't show their kids' faces. So they either blur them out or you only see the back of them. So that they still have that like privacy and sense of autonomy. So that you can talk about a situation without people really like knowing your kid in that sense. Or I've seen a lot of people that, just use initials. Oh, M did this or that today. And eventually, if people follow you long enough, they would associate, M is the 8-year-old daughter and K is the 14-year-old son kind of thing. But it's still kind of a little bit of a step back. It doesn't feel as personal that way. So there are different ways that you can kind of approach it. And it really depends on the type of person that you kind of need to have that conversation and understanding with. Kids are a little bit different than parents. As a parent to the children, we have a little bit more say in kind of how that looks.
I love that. That's really helpful advice. And my thought as like as a singer-songwriter, and I'm just realizing how much we use all of these mediums, whether it's creating
Mm-hmm.
music or podcasting or social media or whatever it is. I've been really obsessed with this word transmuting. We kind of
Mm-hmm.
we transmute our like pains and our anger and our emotions and all of our thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
We use these different mediums to work through whatever emotions we're going through, whatever thoughts and feelings we
Mm-hmm.
have, and we process it in these
Yep.
different ways. Like I will frequently like write songs. Like I wrote this song when is school back in? And I was like, teacher, I'm sorry. I should have treated you better. I should have written you like letters and given you all these gifts. And like my kids were like, come on, mom. They were like, why'd you write the song? Come on. Um, and they got it. And eventually like they heard the whole thing and they were like, this is a really fun song. But it was, it's like we need these outlets, like as
Hmm.
human beings, we need a way to
Hmm.
process what we're going through. And I love
Hmm.
using, our voices and creative artistic outlets. And that can look so many ways.
Hmm.
That can look like painting, that can look like sewing, but it can also look like
Yes.
social media. It can also
Hmm.
look like pulling out your voice memo, app on your phone and just talking through it. And
Hmm.
what I was thinking as you were, saying what you were saying just now was that like we can still use all of these mediums, but we don't necessarily have to share it for the world.
Mm, that's another good point too.
Like, and you were talking about B-roll, and it's like you probably record a whole lot more than you
Hmm.
actually share. And it's like, it's really actually therapeutic for us to get it out and for us to
Hmm.
work through it like out loud and
Hmm.
vocally and like with our
Hmm.
hands and like because I talk with my hands a lot, but even like artistically and like painting it out or
Yeah.
drawing it out or like whatever it is that you do that helps you work
Hmm.
through things. Like a lot of people work through stuff, exercising and like running
Hmm.
or like throwing weights around, like whatever it is that helps you get stuff out and process it,
Hmm.
like do it. Like help
Hmm.
it's helpful, it's cathartic to work through the thing. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean in the end that it needs to get shared because that can
Hmm.
be a decision that you make later on.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And like kind of coming back to it from a different perspective too, when we're younger, we transmute all of that through play. But as adults,
Yes.
writing and drawing and coloring and podcasting, that is our adult play. And that is how we have to process those emotions. But you're
Mm,
absolutely right. Not everything has to actually get published and put out in the world in the end, but we can still go through the motions, still go through the steps. Not every artist sells every single painting that they do. Not every songwriter publishes a song on a record. Sometimes it's just for our own personal, and that's okay too. But we should still go through the process of doing it because it's the process that helps us, that brings the awareness that we're looking for.
yes. And it's still valuable. Like
Mhm.
play is so valuable and we stop feel like we've been taught that like, okay, you're not a child anymore. You don't get to play. And it's like, hold up,
Mhm.
rest, play, like all of these things are like still really essential even as
Mhm.
adults. Like we need this opportunity to work through these things in our system and to enjoy our lives.
Mhm.
Like that's
Mhm.
what we're here to like enjoy this existence that we've been given, not just we're not just here to like make money and like be
No.
productive. Like that's not the purpose of your existence.
Mhm.
Like you have so much,
And I
like
feel like so many people miss that. My partner and I have actually been having a conversation lately too about how comfortable we are going down that road because it feels very different as an adult to do something like totally scary and out of the box. Like we're in the process of trying to sell our house. We've got a 2 bedroom, we've got 4 kids. Like we need a 3 bedroom
yeah.
minimum or maximum, like 2 people per room is kind of my ratio here. So we're talking about selling our house anyway, and we've been looking locally and we're just not finding anything. Everything's really expensive now and we need more square footage, which means a bigger budget, and it's just not there as someone who's been self-employed for the last 3 years with an
Yeah.
income that looks like a roller coaster. So we're like, okay, what do we do? So we've been talking about maybe moving like really, really far away, like a different province potentially, or maybe like even internationally. We were looking at a couple houses in Greece. And I was like, most people would look at us and go, you're absolutely insane. You want to pick up and move to a different country away from all of your friends and family and like all of these things and basically start over. But like my childhood sense of adventure is saying, Brittany, that sounds absolutely amazing. You've always wanted to travel. You want to share these beautiful places and experiences with your kids. Why not do it now? Like, why not? Why not? But the practical adult part of me, those outside voices, are telling me that it's absolutely insane to be an entire flight away from your family. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know where we are at this crossroads, but house hunting is not going well.
And it's so funny how like we often get nudged and sometimes straight up forced into our growth journeys.
Hmm.
And it seems like you are on the precipice of such a growth journey, regardless of where you end up landing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we are here to expand, we're here to grow, and we're afraid of that stretch because every time you
Mm-hmm.
grow, it's a stretch, and stretching kind of hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Like that soul stretch is kind of painful, but on the other side of it is, we're expanded, we're better humans. On the other side, we know more, we understand more, but
Mm-hmm.
it kind of hurt a little to get there because it meant getting outside of our comfort zone.
And it means sacrifice. Every decision there is in business, it's the opportunity cost. Even doing nothing has an opportunity cost, but we don't look at life in the same way. We look at it, okay, well, moving to a different country means we don't have support, but staying here and being close to support means that we don't have those experiences that we're craving too. So there is an opportunity cost to both of them, and it's just a case of, in our situation, figuring out which opportunity costs we're okay with living with right now.
Right. Mm, we always have a choice. And
Hmm.
it's a matter of, do you want to grow or do you want to stay stagnant?
Hmm.
And which one are you going to choose?
Stay tuned. Who knows?
Oh, this has been amazing. How can we find you and follow you and join in on your adventure?
Yeah, I would love to have you. You can find me on social media at Brittany Miller Socials. That's BrittanyMiller socials with an S. And I'm going to be sharing everything there. So that'll be some feedback on where we're going with our house buying decision making process and what social media, email marketing, and podcasting trips I feel called to share at that point in time. You get a little bit of everything if you come join me on the gram.
We love it. I love seeing the whole picture and like having actual humans on the other side of businesses because
Hmm.
it helps us see like, the realness, the humanity. I
Hmm.
love it so much. So thank you. This has been so amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great chatting.
You too. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Multi Passionate Mama podcast. I know that we can never be told too many times how amazing we are, so in case you haven't been told today, you are a freaking rock star. When you let yourself shine, you allow other people to take off their filters and shine brightly too. It's about time someone gave you permission to be all of you. If you enjoyed this show, please leave me a review and hit that subscribe button. I know you want more of this. Sharing is caring. Let someone you love know how incredible they are by texting them the link to this episode. They will feel so good just knowing that you thought about them. Lastly, if you want to know more about my courses and coaching, be sure to check out my website for up-to-date details on everything I have available. It's caroleegarrison.com and the link is in the show notes. Always remember that you are a diamond. Don't let anyone dim your sparkle.